early yesterday morning, following all the rain that we've gotten, a really huge tree fell just around the corner from our house, and it took down four power poles. I mean, it took them right down, and it knocked out power in our entire neighborhood. Now, at first, we were told that it would be back up by noon. I think this was around 8 o'clock in the morning that it got knocked out. And then noon became 2 o'clock. And then the next we heard they would have it back up by midnight. And then we heard 2 in the morning. And then we said not until the next day. And it didn't come on till about 5 a.m. So all in all, we were out of power for about 21 hours. So woe is us, right? On top of everything that's going on, it was a real drag to be without even more than we're used to. And we were worried about our food spoiling. We had to go out and get ice and fill up coolers. And it was a hassle. And I even had to use, God forbid, I had to use a lighter instead of the electronic igniters on my stove when I cooked dinner. And chas v'shalom, we had no Netflix. Oh, the humanity. Now, I admit that my initial response was to gripe and to complain about how much this stinks. But over the course of the day, I was reminded of a Hasidic tale, and I'm going to share this tale with you. There was once a man named, well, we'll call him Itzik. And Itzik he wasn't rich, but Itzik wasn't poor either. Well, one day, Itzik had just had it up to here. He just had enough between his small house and his kids running around all the time. And it was just way too crowded. It was way too dirty, way too chaotic, way too noisy. And Itzik didn't know what to do. He was at his wit's end. So he went to see the wisest man in town. Now, everybody knows the wisest man in town, right? The rabbi. So Itzik went to see the rabbi. Rabbi, what can I do? My house is way too crowded, way too dirty, way too noisy. And the rabbi said, tell me, Itzik, do you have any chickens? Yes, I do, Rabbi. I keep them out in the yard, but I don't see what this has to do with anything. Well, bring the chickens into the house, said the rabbi. Now, this seemed a bit strange to Itzik, but the rabbi knows what's best, right? So the next day, Itzik was back in the rabbi's office, and he says, Rabbi, I did what you said, but it's even worse now. The chickens are constantly clucking, and the house is still way too crowded, way too dirty, and way too noisy. Tell me, Itzik, said the rabbi, do you have a goat? Yes, I have a goat. It's also in the yard. Great, said the rabbi. I want you to bring the goat into the house. But Rabbi, Itzik got his goat, and he brought it into the house. Well, the next day, of course, Itzik was back. He says, Rabbi, I did what you said, but now it's even worse. The goat is butting everybody, the chickens are constantly clucking, and the house is still way too crowded, way too dirty, and way too noisy. Tell me, Itzik, the rabbi says, do you have a cow? Let me guess, says Itzik, you want me to bring the cow into my house? You got it, says the rabbi. Now, Itzik thought that the rabbi at this point was seriously nuts, but the rabbi's the rabbi. He went home and he brought the cow in. Now, the next day, of course, Itzik was back. He said, Rabbi, I did what you said, and I'm about to go out of my mind. The cow is pooping everywhere. The goat is butting everyone. The chickens are constantly clucking, and the house is still way too crowded, way too dirty, way too noisy. In fact, it's worse than it ever was. So the rabbi says, Itzik, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home. I want you to take the cow out of the house. I want you to take out the goat. I want you to take out the chickens and come back tomorrow and tell me how it goes. So the next day, Itzik was back. Rabbi, I did what you said. Thank you. Thank you so much. The house is so spacious. It's clean. It's quiet. Life is way better than it ever was. Now, I know it's hard right now. Believe me, I know. We're all antsy, And maybe we're all approaching that point where Itzik found himself. We've just had it up to here. But we need to count ourselves fortunate, because the fact is, there are many who don't have it so good. Now, what's the worst thing that happened to Marie and me over the last 24 hours? Duke had an army of trucks and workers going at it all night nonstop. And us? We used some candles to have light. And we talked to each other. And I played guitar. And we went to sleep earlier than we normally would have. And when the power did come on, about 5 o'clock in the morning, boop, the lights went on. It woke me up, but it was cause for celebration. I said, Baruch Hashem. So it got me thinking. We are right now in the counting of the Omer. You know, we spend these days between the second day of Pesach, the season of our liberation, and Shavuot, the season of getting Torah, the season of our revelation. We spend these days counting the Omer, and each week has a different midah, a different attribute, a different sphira of God's divine self, which really speaks to the attributes of ourselves, because we are in God's image. So the fourth week of the Omer, counting, according to the Kabbalists, is the week of Netzach. Netzach is the attribute of endurance, of fortitude, and of determination. And tonight, we enter Gvura shebenetzach, which is discipline in endurance. It takes discipline to focus on the blessings and not to dwell on the problems. It's a choice. That's what a discipline is. It's something we choose to do. We can choose to focus on the blessings, and that's how we endure. That's how we find that netzach. Because if we only think about the things that we don't have, well, let's face it, there's an endless list of the things that we don't have. For all of us, I know our lives have become more than inconvenient, and in many ways, hard, difficult. And I'm not trying to minimize it, but I will say this: Gam zeh ya'avor, this too shall pass. And in the meantime, maybe we can cultivate our abilities to take stock of our lives and focus on the good, so that when the chickens and the goats and the cows are finally back in the yard where they belong, we'll more fully appreciate the many simple blessings that we have in our lives. And I say Shabbat Shalom.